Hello and welcome. I'm Kevin. This is the Arknight Shadow channel. Welcome to the Monastery Dojo, where we do all things Runeblade and Shadow Runeblade. Uh, my big news from the last weekend is I managed to win a Pro Quest with Vynnset. I believe, at least this, according to the LL sheet, first one and only one. So, gotta gotta leave my mark with my Shadow Runeblades. Gotta make it on those honor rolls. Welcome, ballers. Welcome, welcome. Um, so for today, I think we're probably gonna skip the gameplay. We're gonna go over the deck, talk about the event a little bit, sort of the ideas behind some of the card choices, especially some stuff that is a little or not as frequently seen in some of the lists that get thrown around in Purple Cord in the Ballers channel. Um, so this ProQuest I won was on Saturday. It was over in Pennsylvania. It was actually for so it was only a 20-person event, but for a 20-person event, it was reasonably stacked with talent. Rhea Adams, Dan Grossclose, Pat Eschke, Jesse Hudak, Alex Becker, Alex recently off a U.S. Nats top 32 finish. So there was some players at this event. Uh, so it wasn't just oh, Kevin showed up to a 8-person event with 7 people who didn't know how to play the game and got the win. No, not quite, not quite. Um, the overall event went well. It was fun. The deck it continues to be an absolute blast to play. I had a really wide spread of matchups throughout this ProQuest. Ended up being a total of 8 rounds. um, But yeah, so the deck as is, I know this has been going around a bit. Nothing terribly shocking in the main deck. I know I'm on more Mauvrion Skies than most people, but aside from that, everything in this sort of 45 card core is pretty cut and dry standard. Um, in the sideboard, we've got our array of medium blues that I can't quite decide which ones I like the most, so we're sort of 2-2-2 split right now. We've got 6 defense reactions that are 0 for 4s or 0 for 5s, sometimes 0 to 6, 0 for 6 in Reduced to Rune Chance case. Card is incredible. 2 Revel and Runebloods. That's how we, get downhill. When we need to explode, we need to force double gate turns. Revel and Runebloods one of the easiest ways to make that happen. Similarly, it's a similar reasoning why we're on 3 Beseech the Demagon and 2 Bounding Demagon. Having a 0-cost gate is really valuable. The 0-cost buff of Beseech is very strong. It's another lead-off shadow, not attack action, which is very important. My ideal I have 2 cards in hand play is Beseech, pay a life into Deathly Wail. That threatens, let's see, if it's at least 3 rune chance, and then 7 to 9 physical damage, and sets you up for the next turn no matter what. I found that particularly into the ninjas, trying to get them to where they're playing small ball with you helps a lot in those matchups. Akatsu with a 5-card hand is very terrifying, but Akatsu with a 2 cards in an arsenal, not so much. So the matchups that I faced at this ProQuest, round 1 was against a Fi. Sorry, I've got my my life pad scribbles here just to remind me of what happened. I won the die roll, went first. That happened in most of the rounds of this event. But in Defy, I got to go first. I had a fine setup and was able to get off a double gate on turn, I think it was turn 3, throughout a 20 plus damage turn. Kind of was able to get them on the back foot at that point. Their first big offensive turn, I was able to have a reduced rune chant in Arsenal for, and so between the reduce, a couple cards, and I think one of my equipment blocks, their first turn didn't really. I think they pushed like 4 damage. Um, or like Kodachis, and they tickled a bit, but didn't get any mass triggers. Weren't able to turn that offense into anything more explosive. And then my rebuttal was, uh, you know, banish something, Mob Skies, Deathly Whale, Flail type turn. Um, and so getting the ninjas to play on smaller hand size with you is really important, and has felt like a consistent feature of games that I have won into ninjas. So I think there's definitely something to that game plan. Uh, I ended up winning this game at 12 life. It would have been a little closer, but one of the Fi's hands late, like I had sort of they I had tempo, I had a lead, and they came back with a hand that their Art of War hand just didn't pan out super well, and so it didn't threaten one of those huge Fi turns. Like realistically, if they draw better off their Art of War there, I probably end up taking another 5 to 7 damage on that turn, and this game looks a lot closer at the end, but just didn't shake out that way. Round 2 was against another Vynnset. There are actually 3 Vynnsets at this event, which was pretty funny. So 3 Vynnsets. This game, I think this game came down to equipment loadout. I won the die roll. I chose to go first. Opponent was super friendly. This game was a blast to play. But I was on this loadout you see here. The exception being, instead of Scepter of Pain, I brought in Grimoire of the Haunt as just a cooler looking Arcane Lantern. I don't have anything in this deck that would ever make use of an Eloquence token, so this is literally just AB1 on my gloves for the whole game, never breaking it. My opponent was on Vexing Quill Hand and Grimoire, so they had AB2, or two different instances of AB1, and not a lot. Like I think in the long run, it was the equipment suite difference that made the difference in the game. So they didn't have Grasp of the Arknight blocks to block a Mob Skies a couple times, so it took an extra card or 2 from hand. The first time, so because they weren't running Grasp, and so I knew that they couldn't perma fix with Grasp like I could potentially. I prioritized trying to stop the rune chant production. It's interesting that the Vynnset mirror has some elements that reminded me of the Lexi mirrors, where some of those games can end up going to fatigue because you end up blocking a lot because the on hits were so devastating. Well, I blocked with 3 or 4 cards several times in that game to keep their Deathly Whales from connecting, keep their flails from hitting, and tried to make them need to break the Quill Hand. Hey, thanks, Rodolph Hawk. Much appreciated. Yeah, I was super stoked to get the win. It was a really, really cool feeling. But yeah, so the Vynnset mirror, there was a lot of blocking. I was trying to specifically go out of my way to try and keep their rune chant production stifled. And it took a while, and there were points in the game where I felt a little behind, but eventually the armor suite differences sort of caught up with them. There was a time where I blocked out, they drew up, I didn't really have a turn because I had blocked out, and they drew up, they banished a card, and had to break Quill Hand to come in with a Deathly Whale, which I again blocked super heavily and just was thankful that I got the Quill Hand on that turn cycle. and from there, that was sort of how that game played out. So they pressed the offense. I blocked a lot. The next turn cycle, they weren't able to gate, so they just attacked with something from hand that wasn't threatening any more rune chant production. And so that was my window to take a bit of damage and come back with my setup and keep the ball rolling. And then eventually, they missed rune chant on another hand, but and so they had to break. They had to cash in Grimoire for the Eloquence token to play a Read the Runes with Go again to get their gate off. And from that point, I turned into a Guardian. I was like, okay, I have a. At that point, it was like 11-5 or 9-5 in that range in my favor, and they broke Grimoire, and I'm like, okay, I have my game plan. It's the same reason why I have no Eloquence targets in this deck, because breaking your Grimoire, unless you are winning the game off of that play, you don't do it. It's too risky. But from that point, I was able to just bleed them out. Presented enough to take cards from hand, and then as any true baller would, while they were at 1, they attacked me with Flail of Agony, and they died. And it was a very honorable matchup that I was able to come out on top. Round 3, I got paired into my friend Dan Grossclose, who's sort of a bit of a magician when it comes to ninjas, and got the dub there. Round 4, played into Icelander. Icelander matchup is interesting, and my new loadout for that matchup paid off. So you'll see that there is no Carapace in this list currently. So into Icelander. So at this point, because of how the meta shifted and how Dromides are now more on the red line way of thinking, they're going to be a little more arcane spammy than they used to. Maybe not completely, right? There's still going to be some attack action, some poppers, but they're going to be more, more of them are going to be running like 9 Aether Ice Vein type things. So I went with Tunic, Creepers, Flail, Quill Hand, Grimoire, Ebonfold. So I had AB2, Spell Void 2. The thinking is, I'm not going to fatigue them. That's never going to happen. AB2 is to mitigate some damage along the way while you look for your, like 2 good explosive turns is what you're really looking for in that matchup. And you get sort of a freebie with Quill Hand because in a pinch, Quill Hand is 2 rune chance, aka 2 resources, so it turns on a free secondary gate for 8 damage if they ever decide that they're not blocking or they can't interrupt you. And then Ebonfold is good in this matchup because of blue Aether Ice Vein specifically. That was actually a huge moment in the game late. They were able to, I led off with a buffer, Mavrian Skies. Their response was blue Aether Ice Vein from Arsenal and triggered an Insidious Chill. And I was able to pitch a blue, pay 2 for the Insidious Chill tax, pay AB1, and pop Ebonfold for Spell Void 2. So I was able to get out of that without having to give up a second card, which proved to be, not the difference in the game, because at that point I was a bit ahead. But it sort of was the nail in the coffin on that turn cycle that they couldn't take a second card from me. And yeah, so that equipment suite change worked out very nicely. I had the early game started out rough. They got to go first. Their turn 0 was Sigil of Solace and Channel Lake Frigid. Like that was the turn 0. CLF, gain 3 life up to 39, Arsenal a card, go was the start of this game. So I got taxed. I blocked Arcane a fair bit early. I let myself accrue 2 good attack actions in Banish. I definitely I think a couple times in the game purposefully banished non-blood deck cards because I just didn't want to fall behind on that if they should have found other good disruption to keep me off of these turns. But basically, I stemmed the bleeding for a bit as much as I could. I think I was at some point in this game I was down like 33 to 20, somewhere in there, which normally you don't win games against Icelander when you're down life. Sometimes you don't even win if you're up life. But I stemmed the bleeding enough, set up a huge turn with a Revel, and took them from like 34 to 14 in one turn. Um, and once I had the life lead again, I still was able to take most of the cards from their hand. And at that point, it was just about sending consistently above rate stuff while trying my best not to put the shields down. And then Ebb and Fold, saved me on a time where they could have kept themselves alive. It didn't let them do that. Uh, Prioritizing big turns or consistent turns that match up. I think that so a little bit of both, and it's kind of contextual. There's no hard and fast rule for it because it sort of depends on what's the current state of their disruption. Do they have an Insidious Chill running? Is there a CLF in play? What cards do I have access to? If I don't have a blue to pay through like 3 resources of taxing, I usually won't try and go for the bigger turns. But you do need to prioritize them, but also you ideally don't just give them all the time in the world to use full 4-card hands against you. So it's a weird tightrope to walk, and I don't necessarily think that this matchup is massively favored in either direction, but the texture of the game matters so much in figuring out what kind of posture you should be taking. But the what I know from I know correlation isn't causation, but in the games that I win against Icelander, there's one massive double gate turn, whether that is off of Spellbound Creeper's Revel double gate or just buff Deathly Whale, give it go again, second gate afterwards. So it's stem the bleeding, try and maintain your reasonable life differential. Don't let yourself fall too far behind on blood debt because that's just a win con for them in addition to their arcane. And wait for a crack in the seam that is their disruption. And as soon as you find a spot where you're like, okay, all the disruption I'm getting hit with this turn is, some arcane damage and a frostbite, like that's golden. Like I think my big turn came on a turn when Icelander did a blue ice bolt, and used Scepter off of their Alluvian Constellus. But yeah, so you have to look for probably one extra big turn to establish a life lead, and then at that point, as long as you can sort of play your turns consistently above rate, you'll eventually close them out. But the first thing you need to do is establish the life lead with a big turn. Round 5 was into Dromai. It would have been Pat Eshke as my opponent. At that point, I was the last undefeated, so I was already locked for first seed in the top 8. And he was playing Dromai, which as a matchup I like on this deck. So I scooped and we went and grabbed food. More Dromai in the top 8 is a good thing for me, and I've played Pat at these bigger events on a number of occasions, and so definitely not someone I mind scooping to. So he did end up in the top 8 as well. I think the top 8 in the end we had 2 Dromai, 2 Katsu, Lexi, Vynnset, Bolton, and Icelander. The Icelander player that I faced also made top 8. The nightmare happened though, and I was like, cool, let me just dodge this Lexi in top 8. But it was impossible for that to happen because The Lexi was 2-2, won their last round. It was the top of the 2-2s, so they were guaranteed to be the top of that subsection of the standings, and they were an eighth seed prior to that last round, so they were locked in. I was destined for first place after the 4-0 start. So I was like, all right, if I'm going to win a ProQuest during Lexi's last joyride, let's go through Lexi. And fortunately, I had the higher seed, so I chose to go first. Put myself to 39 on turn 0, like we do. But it was a pretty good setup. And similar to the games, the Ninja games that go well, their first turn was I'm blanking a little bit. I don't think it was a 3 of a kind turn, but it was like a solid 3 arrow wide initial turn. But between a bit of armor blocks and a defense reaction, I only gave up like 4 points of damage on their initial barrage. I think I just took I don't even remember, just a random 4 damage. Might have been some junk arrow, I think. But yeah, escaped that turn, only taking like 4 damage. And on my turn, I sent probably just I think I blocked pretty heavily to like hold the line on my life total. Came back with just like a 1 card 10 with like a Deathly Whale, I think. And more importantly, right on time, got a Runeblade incantation as my tunic came up. So I was able to have another turn cycle where I block a decent bit. You block the stuff that's going to let them draw cards. You block Heat Seeker if you reasonably can. It's not always vital to do so, but trying to make good use of my defense reactions and my good armor to establish a decent board. And I was able to land an incantation off of a tunic and still send back like a 1 card 10 type turn. And at that point, that's where I think things started to shift in my favor a little bit, because I was working with a life lead in this game for a little while. I was able to sort of just make them play this efficiency game with me, but I could block with 3 cards and send back 8 to 10 damage, and they couldn't quite match that efficiency. In the end, they came in with I forget the name of the buff, but +3 makes frostbites if it hits on a headshot for 10. And I blocked for 3 on the 10 and took 7 down to 5, or took 7 down to 6, while they were at 7. Because looking at my hand, I had a blue. I knew that a good 3-card hand I could present a good amount of damage, and my comeback was, what did I have? I had Beseech and a Deathly Whale, and I think that was it. But also I was threatening, I had a card in Arsenal, had some floating resources, and was threatening a Revel or theoretically flashing something in to go again to push a little more damage. But they had an awkward hand that was a couple 2 blocks and a Rain Razors. So it was really tough for them to block it out. And they, saw the writing on the wall from 7 when I was going to be passing Rune Chants to the next turn from Deathly Whale. And they ended up conceding because they knew they were going to have to, block out with their whole hand, present nothing, and I was going to come back in with Arcane again on the next turn. So got through the Lexi, which was which I thought was going to be the hardest matchup of the day. Didn't turn out that way though, as my top 4 opponent was my buddy Alex Becker on Dromai, which again is a matchup that I'm very comfortable seeing. My team has some very good Dromai players on it, so I get plenty of reps into Dromai. The downside is the Dromais on my team are probably better into Vynnset than most Dromais in the world. Uh, and so, as much as I was ready for what Alex was going to throw at me, he was very ready for what I was going to throw back his way. Um, yeah, yeah. This game that we played was absurd. Was far and away the hardest match of the day. It was just a hell of a game. Uh, but I so early on, Alex drew really well in terms of the things that Dromai wants to see in order to establish a foothold and be able to beat up on a Vynnset. Early on, Mirror Guy into Kyloria, swing things out. I was able to come back and like clear the Mirror Guy, but didn't have a way to clear the Kyloria that turn. His next turn, he plays another Mirror Guy, attacks with the Kyloria, and then instead of attacking with the Mirror Guy, ends on a passing Mirage, so ends up with two things that turn off all my sixes. But I have a hand that had like a Shadow Verser or a couple, like a blue and a red Phantom Wraith, along with there's a reason that I have 9 Mavrian Skies in my deck list, and Dromai is why. And I think I had a hand that had a couple go get enablers and 2 gate attacks between one I had Chillin' and Banish and one in hand. And I was able to take the full turn cycle, kill Mirror Guy, kill Kyloria, kill Passing Mirage, and was able to keep the board from getting fully set up. Because that's it. As soon as once you can't use your sixes to turn off their turn, that's where you get into a lot of trouble in that matchup. So Mirror Guy and Passing Mirage are both top priority targets. Like unless you can present like 15 damage and guarantee kill them while one of those things are on the board, you clear them. You just have to. But we slogged it out for a while. It was, we walked down life totals together. I think I was at 21 when he was at 19. The next couple turns, he had to play some of the slightly less scary dragons, and I was able to blow up some of those with some Maverian Skies and push some arcane damage. Most Dromais are not running much arcane barrier, if any, at this point, so a lot of that was just kind of free roll damage. But I prioritized keeping the board clear as much as possible. Had a really interesting late turn. There wasn't a burn them all in play, but it was a late turn where like I had the lead, but it was like 8 to I think like 3 or 2. All right, it was pretty good, decent life total lead from my perspective. But a really easy way to lose those is to get arcaned out of the game, because I definitely didn't run any arcane into Dromai, arcane barrier into Dromai, and Alex, before we get into this Asvali play, there was another turn where my hand just lined up perfectly into a turn that Alex was making. He was able to go Chromai into Kyloria, and I popped with a widespread destruction the first Chromai, popped with a widespread destruction the second Chromai, and reduced a rune chant out of Arsenal to block the Kyloria attack. So I didn't let any on hit draw card effects hit in this entire game. Made it a very strong priority to do that. But it was late. I had a 5-point lead. Looking at a 4-card hand where my only popper was also my only gateable attack for the following turn cycle, because my hand was it was Revel, Incantation, Widespread Ruin, and a blue Deathly Whale. And I had one rune chant. I was going to go to 2 at the start of the turn. No, I had no rune chants. I was going to go to 1 at the start of the turn. So the only way I was gating anything is if I gated Widespread Ruin. But I was staring down an Asvali that the Arcane put me to 8, and was threatening to put me to 6 if it hit. And I thought about it for a very long time, and eventually went with what felt like the least least worst option. And I actually I popped the Asvali with the Widespread Ruin, stayed at 8. And then my turn, I banished Revel in Runeblade to go to 1 Rune Chant. I put an incantation into play with the Deathly Wail, and then used Scepter to ping them for 1 Arcane to make another Rune Chant, which like felt very conservative. And the reason that I ended up doing that play is I still had Tunic and Spellbound Creepers up, so I could cover. Having 2 armor block there is huge. It gives me flexibility to still block some on hits while keeping a 1-card hand to threaten lethal on the following turn cycle, anyways. I think the next turn I had a popper for and was able to close the deal there. He had, by the time he was able to set up a board of Ashwings, which those almost stole this game by themselves. Aether Ashwings are just absurdly powerful. He got me down to 4. I had to put myself to 2 on the following turn to threaten lethal, or he got me down to 3. My next turn, though, I had three Rune Chants, and I was able to go Beseech, Pay a Life into Deathly Delight. So if that didn't win me the game on the spot, it was going to take the whole hand and leave me at 4, which is safe-ish. But as it turned out, on that hand, he was all red and couldn't block the arcane and the physical damage, and I got that game. But it was wildly close. It was tough, and yeah, it definitely was my longest tank of the game on the decision to pop the Asvali, but it paid off. Yeah, don't let Dromai have a board. That's the takeaway there. And then my finals opponent was another Katsu, and yeah, so we both went home happy from that finals, and I was able to get the invite to Pro Tour Los Angeles and get some LL points for Vynnset. It was cool as heck. The deck felt good. There's only a few things, I guess, throughout the day, and part of it is just the matchups that I got, but a few things that I'm looking to change going forward. But for starters, just a few points that I want to specifically touch on. 9 Mobs guys feels necessary to me to keep Dromai as a matchup that I would consider good. I won't be shocked in the future if Dromai starts running more Arcane Barrier, and by more I mean literally no rune clubs or something. Just to have the option. Most lists are on like 3 to 6 blues, right? Probably Passing Mirages and maybe Warmonger's Diplomacies or Blue Dust Ups are the sort of the most commonly seen ones. But a few more blues can change the way this game looks a little bit. I know that's a weird proposition with Tome in the mix, but still something to look out for. Flail. I'm on Flail and Scepter into Dromai. I don't think that Nebula Blade is the answer. That's not how the games tend to go for me. Like, it just doesn't. I don't want to have to hold those cards, I guess. And part of the game plan is keep the important dragons off the board, keep your life total advantage by sending Arcane that they're going to struggle to block, and prioritize killing the things on the board that keep your poppers from being effective, which is Chromai, Miragai, and Passing Mirage. The 2 Revel in Runebloods are sweet. I think they're very good. Obviously, they're an Onbo. The original reason I cut them forever ago, they were in my first lists. I cut them the first time that I, did a Deathly Will play on Talishar and then didn't get to leave my setup, and that moment left a bad taste in my mouth. But eventually realized the card's just so strong. The ability to have a turn where you can just go like Beseech or Mobskies into any gate, and then just go Tunic Resource Creepers, Revel second gate for another 10 damage. Like it's just the easiest 20 damage turn you've ever set up. And I think playlines like that are going to be essential for beating what is the toughest matchup, which is absolutely Bravo. Bravo is uh, probably the matchup that I would most like to avoid going to Worlds, which we'll see if I am blessed by the gem gods or not. I have some thoughts on how to improve that matchup. I haven't tested those thoughts, so I'm not going to share them with everyone yet because if they work, I want people to be surprised, and if they don't work, then it's kind of pointless to tell everyone anyways. This will be very close to the list I play at Worlds. It's not going to be exactly the same, and I'm not going to share it prior to Worlds. But the core is here. The core is not changing. Um, I'm going to be on 9 Mobs guys. I'm going to be prepared to try and beat up on Dromai as much as possible. Bounding Demagon is another one that's kind of just a role player that it has felt good. Feels like it smooths things out. Really, like going into the late game when you're trading 2-card hands with your opponent, if you block 6 with any pair of 3 blocks and then are able to come back with like Beseech into Bounding Demagon, that's a 2-card 8 that's really threatening 1 and 7, right? Like that's 2 breakpoints is very strong. And sometimes just the ability to push more damage instead of flail, even if you're just throwing Bounding out as a 0 for 4, has felt good at times. Kind of viewed as a necessary evil. If we had a few more 2-cost gates, those would probably get the nod over the Demagon, but sort of just working with the card pool available to us at the moment. Nebula Blade currently for this list is coming in for Bravo, or if I know someone's on Tree Frog Dash, or as I learned from a match in a previous ProQuest, Arachne. So anyone who's like trying to work hard to fatigue you and trying to block you out consistently, that's where I like Nebula. Because we've got 12 go again enablers with the Mobs guys and the Shadow Puppetries, being able to use floating resources after you do go again into a gate, threatening 4 damage plus the on hit is really good, and keeps you on the front foot and cards in hand. And into Azuri, I'm still on Flail Scepter, but the reason I'm not into Arachne is because Arachne is going to be running 2 to 3 times as many contract cards in the deck. They're going to incidentally be able to rebuy that equipment, and that was the difference in a ProQuest game I had against an Arachne that I ended up losing. They rebought 2 or 3 pieces of equipment, and I think I flailed probably six or 7 times that game, and I think they got blocked by one Battle Worn 1 equipment that they could rebuy like 6 out of the 7 times, and it was devastating. Their ability to recursively block the setup that this was trying to present. And at least with Nebula Blade, if it's trying to push it, at least we're taking another card for our trouble, because you can offensively fatigue Tree Frog Dash and Arachnes. Their card for card damage wise isn't quite as good. So running a weapon that complements your go again stuff and demands a card and equipment can threaten to offensively fatigue opponents. At US Nats, I played a Tree Frog Dash in the 3rd round. After my first round was Bravo, so like I lost to Bravo, and then got paired to a Tree Frog Dash not long after, and I'm like, oh, I'm clearly not meant to do well in this event. But I was able to win. I was able to eke out the win with like two solid like Revel double gate turns that pushed more damage that they could block. But most of their cards are blocking for 3 or 4, and they had blues to do AB. But like if I'm throwing out a one card six from my deck and they have to use two cards to block it, I'm trading up, right? Like it's a principle from Bright Lights Draft that you can see in action in a different kind of environment. But I prioritized pitching two cost gates so I could keep gating really late into the game, and I tried to just send efficient few card hands. I kept trading up on cards. I kept my setup rolling, and then whenever I could, I swung with Nebula Blade. And during that matchup, it was Nebula Blade got blocked by equipment a couple times and by a couple 0 for 4 defense reactions. And cool. Give me one of your good cards from deck for this sword that's just sitting here. And I was able to win through damage before we went to time, but I was on my way to fatiguing the Tree Frog Dash, which felt insane. But it was a really cool, I guess, mental exercise, or cool that was almost an option for a way to win the game. Yeah, so ProQuest season was cool. I ended up doing. So I played in 5. I judged 1. 4 of the 5 I played in were CC. I top 8'd 3 of the 4. The fourth one I got 9th place. I had a round 1 loss, and the Breakers came back to haunt me. So I got 9th, 5th, top 8, and then a win this ProQuest season, all on Vynnset. Learned a lot, had a blast playing it regardless. And yeah, I'm definitely playing it for Worlds. So it'll be fun. We'll see if I can continue having a similar amount of success. I'm certainly hopeful. We'll see what happens. As far as things to potentially change for this deck, since obviously Lexi was still around for these ProQuests, but now she won't be. I expect to see a bit less Uzuri, not no Uzuri, but like a bit less. I expect to see more Azalea again. And with Bravo being a tough matchup, Unmovable is a card that I'm strongly considering, like 1 to 2 copies of. I'm still trying to figure out how I best want to set up my blues. I've like a 2-2-2 split between Banshee Ursa and Putrid Surge. This is because into Dromai, I want more attacks. Into Bravo, I want more cards that go tall, which would be Putrid and Phantom. But like into Dromai, I don't want blue Putrid Snurrings. It's not really a card I want to see because I need to prioritize going wide over going tall. I'm gonna keep working on this, and I'm sure for Worlds I have a slightly different configuration of these blues. I'm not 100% sure if I even need to be on Nebula Blade for the fatigue matchups. Something I've been thinking about that could work is, trying to make a more concerted effort to set up like over the top double gate turns, or potentially even bringing Oblivion back into the mix to try and play towards Nazareth in certain situations. It's a little easier said than done. That card has not worked well for me up to this point. And that's partially, I'm sure, because of the way I tend to play it, but also I'm not on any Read the Runes. This list doesn't have any Funeral Moon in it, so it's a little less frequent for me to get up to, 5+ rune chance than a lot of other Vynnset builds that I've seen. But it is on my radar. It's definitely, it's the kind of card that can potentially swing a bad matchup, like Bravo. Being able to play a 0-cost card that is sort of a double gate and also is just going to gain you 6 life when they have to kill it that's huge. That's a huge swing. I don't know if that fits well enough into the way that this build is constructed. My version is more focused on Dromai and trying to hang with ninjas. But maybe the answer might just be trying to play patient, setting up Revel or Shadow Puppetry, trying to set up for a Deathly Whale into another double gate, and just basically having more fully off turns in order to facilitate way over the top big offensive turns that even decks like Bravo that's trying to fatigue you um, can't manage to block it all out and get the wins that way. But no doubt about it, Bravo is definitely the toughest matchup, and I don't have I don't have a good answer to that one yet as far as how we fix it. But every deck's got bad matchups. Dromai has bad matchups, and I suspect we might be one of them, which is why I'm excited to play this at Worlds next week. Last thing to touch on specifically is Beseech the Demagon. For a while, I was on like several Beseech and Runic Reckoning. Runic Reckoning, obviously a 3-block Nimblism, but it doesn't have the Shadow text on it, which has been really, really important and is why this slot is Beseech over Reckoning right now. Runic Reckoning is a really great in-between card. If I end up with a slot that is, in some matchups I kind of wish it was a defense reaction, and in other matchups I wish it was like more Beseech the Demogons, I would consider, supplementing the current counts of things with a Runic Reckoning. But not being able to trigger the shadow text, and also not being good for creepers plays is why Beseech is getting the nod right now. Runic Reckoning, but if you're leading off with a gate, by the time you would be able to creepers, Runic Reckoning costs 1 again. And that is not a 1 resource I'm interested in paying. The scenarios that I like are when we've got Deathly Whale coming in, ideally with, if it's, who knows if it's got go again, who knows if we get to pay beforehand, but if you can present like 4 Arcane and 6, or if it's a matchup where they're just not blocking the Arcane regardless, just throughout the Deathly Whale, you're probably connecting for a non-zero amount of damage into decks that aren't Bravo. And so you deal them a point, you Tunic Creepers, Beseech, pay a life, so that your whale gives you your other chant. And then if it's a Bounding Demagon, you don't have to break the chain. You could still come in for 7 more damage. And then when you're done, Deathly Whale lets you carry over the rune chants. Or if the card you have in Banish is one of our 2-cost gates, you just break the chain, get your rune chants, and send the gate with the Beseech buff. So yeah, it's been much easier to make those big offensive plays with Beseech the Demagon. And even there was even a moment in my game against Alex in the top 4, the Dromai player, that I creepers in a Beseech the Demagon to flail a passing Mirage, which didn't feel good, but it felt necessary. But I think that hand I happen to have a more full hand, so I didn't have to Tunic for it. But the fact that being a 0 cost creepersable thing that you could do off of a Tunic resource is really valuable. And then when you're just getting opponents to play small ball with you, being able to go Beseech Demagon, pay a life, Deathly Whale is a really great bread and butter turn. And yeah, so into ninjas and even into Lexi to a lesser extent, the game plan is try to, block really efficiently early and do some good 1 or 2 card hand exchanges to hopefully convince them to block a little bit. And then once you get them playing small ball, you just need to try and close it out before they see enough 3 of a kinds to overwhelm the fact that you've been trading cards sort of above parity compared to them. But that matchup's not a thing anymore, so we don't have to worry about it. Bye-bye, Lexi. I can't say I'm sad that she's gone now. I'm very excited for what the new metagame can look like. Dash IO is a very explosive deck. I think it probably will prove to be a better matchup for us than Lexi was. Um, I don't they don't block particularly well. The items can be a problem at times, and if you're getting a deck like that, which is a very dedicated aggro deck, to spend resources defensively, even if they're getting like they'll get to recoup some of the value because sometimes they'll block. I had a ProQuest game where a Dio pitched 2 to AB2 and then used the third floating resource to play a Techlocore off the top of their deck, and I was like, whoa, what a value exchange. It was pretty disgusting. But they don't block super well, so I like if we can not get exploded upon horrendously in the first, 1, 2, 3 turns of the game, we can get, a good gate situation going. And that's a deck where, the smaller hand sizes will favor us. That said, I had a game against a Dash that, they dealt 33 to me in a single turn, and I almost brought that back. And then after almost bringing it back, I almost fatigued them. So to the point where if I had made like one different blocking decision earlier in the game to push a little less damage and block like 3 more damage, I could have fatigued them the way that game went down. Um, but I don't think it's a inherently bad matchup. I think similar to Fi, Katsu, the Dash IO matchup is if they don't like blow the doors off of you early, right? Like come in with a really early, overly explosive turn that puts you in a massive hole, um, then I think you're in an okay place. Vynnset is absolutely at her best playing from a lead. That's why, using creepers early to double gate to get a life lead is often can be worth it. But it's we're we're not immune to 30 damage turns as much as anybody is not immune to 30 damage turns. So that's a matchup that, while I'm aware of it, I'm not any more scared of that matchup than I am the ninjas. We sort of operate on a similar axis into all of them. The defense reactions will help us play a little bit better defense, and if you can use a reduced to rune chant to prevent a boom grenade from hitting, like the point value swing on that turn is pretty huge. But that's the only, I guess, the only big change or big thing to be looking out for. And I did pop into Purple Discord because I'm a maniac at some point. And I saw somebody was asking about pumpkins. They were asking about jack-o'-lanterns. And the card is certainly a legal card we can play. And I've got my copies here. I went down to my local game store and I bought some more bright lights to use for draft practice, and I was able to got a case for practice, and I got my jack-o'-lanterns here. I think they are fine. I don't. This is not magically the card that's gonna propel Vynnset to new heights. It's not a card that's gonna make it into my deck for Worlds. It's cool as hell. The art's awesome. I was surprised they actually aren't foil, which was tragic. That's the real reason I can't play them at Worlds, because my deck is foil. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't play them anyways, even though they are sweet. We're just reaching the point with Vynnset that we can make these decks consistent enough to not, make us all want to vomit when we draw a quad non-attack action hand, or don't have a gate, or don't have a blood deck card. And so Jack-o'-lantern is not a card that I'm interested in putting into my real Vynnset deck right now. That said, I did put together a Halloween Vynnset that I was actually supposed to play on stream with Rhea on the On Hit Effect channel that is hers. That we were going to do a Halloween themed streaming session. We both ended up getting busy and we weren't able to make it happen. But this is what it looked like when this is the first brain dump of what would a Jack-o'-lantern Vynnset deck look like. Um, we are more Future Stirrings, more Blood Debt main because we're banishing at random, so we want to be more likely than not to hit. We have minimized our number of yellows more so than my regular deck. The only yellows we're on in the main deck are Deathly Whale and Widespread Destructions are in the side, and we're not even on all the Mavrian Skies. Um, all the Funeral Moons are back in, all the Bounding Demigons are in the main deck, and we are just trying to, you know, make this look as close to draw a card and make a rune chant as we possibly can. Um, I don't think that this is the future of top tier competitive Vynnset decks. At least not without more cards. Like, I'm not saying this is never going to be a card that I want to play in a real deck. I'm just saying right now I don't think I'm so into it. It's the potential is there. This build's got 36 reds in the main 60, so more than half the time you should be hitting. But you know, if you play Jack-o'-lanterns and reveal this blue envelop in darkness, you just played this card and 2-for-1 yourself on cards in deck and have virtually nothing to show for it, unless you're fortunate enough to already have a Bounding Demagon and banish. Um, it could also, on the flip side though, you could play Jack-o'-lantern and uh, pay life if you want to, and hit a Widespread Ruin or a Deathly Whale, and this could take you from 2 to 3 rune chance, and you could Deathly Whale your opponent off of one card in hand, which is kind of crazy. But you already need to have banished for the turn, which makes this a little weird, right? So like, if you're fortunate enough to hit off of this something that you can play, that means it has Blood Debt, and that means that if you aren't using this to like double gate somehow, you're going to take a damage for it. So it's not consistent enough. I just got over being hurt last year at Worlds with, Sonata and Tome of the Arknight, and this is a Sonata Tome of the Arknight variance card. And while it's super fun, the art is phenomenal, and in the future, maybe after Monarch 3, when we have a further density of Blood Debt cards and Blood Debt attacks that we want, such that there are, maybe you could get closer to a redline Vynnset deck. Maybe we could do it then, but just I don't see, this card's cool, but it's just another piece of variance to a deck that is already working to mitigate so many different kinds of variance. So I wouldn't recommend taking this to a ProQuest or Battle Hardened right now. But for your armory, hell yeah, go for it. This will be fun as shit. And we're all about fun here. So I will make sure that I add this Jack-o'-lantern build to the stream description, so people can see it if they want to. But yeah, so any questions about the deck? Any questions about anything Vynnset related, or other potential cards I haven't touched on, or game plans, or play patterns? If you're in chat and you want something you want to know, please let me know. I would love to answer. At least I will answer to the best of my abilities. I think going forward, I think Vynnset's going to be a perfectly real deck into the meta. Being a deck that can come in and say my matchups into Um, you know, Dromai is positive into ninjas is within the realm of acceptably close to 50-50. And that like I think I think Vynnset into Icelander is less Icelander favored than Vynnset into Viserai, and Viserai could absolutely steal some games into Icelander if they weren't careful, and sometimes even if they were careful. So um, yeah, I think Vynnset will be in a fine spot going forward. Pedro, you're welcome. I saw this hero and I got excited and then I got unexcited, and at some point I went back to it. It was basically before US Nats, and I was trying to figure out what to play, and I was about to begrudgingly pick up Lexi, and I didn't even get the deck completely sleeved up, and I'm just like, okay, hang on, I need to stop this because this is a card game. I don't want to have fun playing this card game. I want to win. I want to do well. That's super fun too. Uh, but more importantly, I want to be like playing the game that is fun for me. And Lexi was not that. Vynnset was that. It was night and day the difference between me being like, all right, guys, I'm just gonna say I'm playing Vynnset for Nats because I want to, and the amount of enthusiasm that I had for playing my test games in the 2 or 3 weeks leading up to Nats after being like, I'm playing Vynnset, I don't want to play Lexi, I'm playing Vynnset was crazy. Like she's so fun, and I am constantly finding new optimizations in the deck. I think my I think my worlds list is going to have an interesting change to it that I'll be interested to see. Purple Cord second guessing, but maybe they'll fall in love with it. Maybe I'm stupid or maybe I'm a genius. We'll see. But yeah, the deck's an absolute blast, and I hope that other people keep picking it up, keep taking it for spins because it's a powerful deck. You're doing objectively powerful things once you sort of learn to roll with the roll with the punches as they come in. Um, I think, uh, yeah, yeah. I was also kind of a bit lost with Chain gone. I did a lot of Viserai for a while. Hey Nick, thanks for the sub, much appreciated. Um, I yeah, I was kind of on Lost Island trying to figure out what to do, and Viserai was just my default for a while because he was my go-to for a long time. But I had an event where I took Viserai 2. I did okay. Um, I beat a few Lexis with it, but I played Yanchi one round and he got an IP2, but he chose to go first, and he loaded an arrow, arsenaled a card, passed to me. I pushed 17 damage, and then his first turn was three of a kind into a 3 arrow wide turn, and he beat me like with double digit life total remaining after I pushed 14 or 17 damage on my opening turn. And I was just like, okay, well we're not playing the same game at this point. Viserai just doesn't have the disruption or the offensive output to beat out what Lexi's doing. So that was kind of depressing. But I also lost to Dan Rutkowski on Vynnset in that event, and I was just like, man, if I'm gonna lose, I need to be doing something cooler. And so that's when I started toying with it more. Um, and yeah, I agree. The nuance on equipment use and lines and knowing when to use things is tough. I so many games end being like, wow, this one minor decision could have changed everything. I had a game where one of I think it was a practice game or something where I could have blocked with Grasp of the Arknight to just save a point of damage. When I was single digits, but I wasn't below 5 yet, and I think I could have like blocked with Grasp to stay at 5 or stay at 6 instead of going to like 3 or 4, whatever, or whatever the difference was. And fast forward like 2 turn cycles, and I'm sitting there looking at a point of block on my Grasp of the Arknight, desperately wishing that I could pay a life to Vynnset to seal the game. So you can't take it with you. So When you get down to single digits with Vynnset, it is often going to be wiser to, not always, but often going to be wiser to make sure that you've cashed in all the defense here to conserve your life total for your shadow shenanigans. Taiki, what do I think about Pummel and CC? I think Pummel is a very powerful card. I think the way Pummel makes you play Vynnset, there's some I don't know, some tension there, right? Because you have to banish at the start of your turn, so you're looking at a 3-card hand. Pitching to pummel a gate is fine. You can do that with having blocked with 1 card, and that's fine value, but it's not flexible, right? In the same way where if my 3-card hand can be, a gate with a pummel and pitch over the top, my 2-card hand could have been Beseech into Widespread Ruin, right? I could have just presented 9 up front instead of with reactions going up to 10 and trying to take a card. And that's why this version I'm on now is more heavier on the front loading, right? Whether it's Mauve Skies or Beseeches compared to Pummel. I might it might be back for Worlds, like in a 1 to 2 of type capacity. It's good into Warmonger's Diplomacy. They're like Warmonger's Diplomacy, and you're like, cool. Now I'm stuck with this handful of cards. Fine, Gate, Pummel over the top, phenomenal. It's also obviously incredibly powerful to pummel a gate that's got a Mavrian Skies attached to it. It can just mess with them, and it can steal some games for you. So it's definitely a consideration. I don't think the days of being a 7 to 9 pummel deck are gone, are behind this deck. I don't think we're ever going back to that world. But if I look at a Vynnset deck list and see between 1 and 3 red pummels, sure, I probably. It seems like a good 1 to 2 of for me. It helps keep people honest, gives them something to think about. If you pitch one early, they'll be like, ooh, where's the next one? There might only be one, but you're going to be in their brain for the rest of the game thinking, oh, is this the time? Is this the time they're going to, tunic pummel with that 1 float in their arsenal card? So it's good. There's some definite value there. And yeah, you're right. You're pinging yourself to death is a part of the pain game. Whenever I play ninjas, it always feels funny because the end of my turn I Kodachi myself, the start of their turn I take 2 Kodachis, so I end up needing like 2 columns for life total for that one. But yeah, Pummel's a card that's totally reasonable to play. Unmovable is totally reasonable to play for Bravo, for Azalea. I'm sure there's worse things you could do into Ninja as well. Not that it's as good there. I also wouldn't be shocked, Reduce and Sync have been phenomenal, and not that I want to overload on defense reactions, but Fate Foreseen is pretty good. It's still just another 0 for 4. Like I could be on one of those. Sigil of Suffering is another solid card. Sort of depends on how tight the curves of the deck I'm expecting are. Like, if you're facing Azalea, I don't necessarily expect them to float a lot of spare resources because they operate on a pretty tight curve a lot of the time anyways. And so, like Sigil of Suffering there is often going to be a 1 card 5 value. But like into Katsu, it's a little tougher to say because the stuff you want to block, they usually still have some more cards in hand for. So I'd probably go to some number of Sink Below before I resorted to Sigil of Suffering. But yeah, there's plenty of other stuff to explore. Funeral Moon is a notable absence. Purple Cord is trying to convince me to put it back in, and I might. I definitely might. I don't. It's not. It's a cool card. It's a card I like. But just in practice, it has felt low impact. Even if it is a rubber cement card. I think 1 to 2 could sneak back in. The 3 block is nice. It's a 0 cost thing. It's a great hit off of Widespread Ruin. It's a card you instantly will banish if you ever hit with a Shadow Puppetry. Um, and it's just more 0 cost stuff to do, which is pretty powerful in general. Not paying resources is great. I'm trying to think if there's uh, any other cards that I'm heavily considering or have been heavily considering. But no, I mean there's a world where I cut Nebula Blade. There's a world where Dyadic Carapace comes back, potentially for when you're forced to go second into ninjas or maybe into Azalea, right? Um, Read the Runes is a great card that I'm not playing, but it might be something that is necessary to set up those giant turns into Bravo potentially. Uh, Envelops, I don't have yellow envelops in here right now. Um, but that card's kind of a necessary evil. But I'm trying to move in the direction of, you know, if someone's like, "What is Tunic for?" Well, Tunic is for making my red Envelop in Darknesses or my red Runeblade incantations cost 0, or making sure that my reduced to rune chance costs 0, even if I would have to pay 1, or for going Tunic Creepers double gate turn, right? Like I don't want it to be a crutch for having a playable turn. I want it to be something that makes the cards in my deck go into overdrive instead of it just be like, okay, as soon as I have a Tunic resource, I have something to do with it. That's not always, I guess, the best use, right? Like maybe instead you should block a little more, banish a card, and wait for a stronger hand or something. Not try and sort of force the issue with some more medium cards. Um, Sigil of Solace, also just a reasonable card that we're not playing. We pay a lot of life, and the ability to just gain some could be good. It also works fine with if you're fine going Beseech into a random vanilla gate, then going vanilla gate and playing a Sigil is kind of a similar value swing. And obviously life gain's a huge commodity. Um, Oath of the Arknight is another interesting one, right? Like Envelop is Shadow, but Oath is a 3 block, and that's big game. I don't know that I would want a bunch of them, but um, there's a world where that's a card that I um, would be more interested in. What other Arcane Barrier picks would you put in a more wizard-heavy field? So if I was expecting, uh, so into Kano and Icelander, Grimoire and Vexing Quillhand for sure. Um, Grimoire for staple Arcane Barrier all the time. Ebb and Fold for Kano, no matter what. I think the percentage points you gain in the Kano matchup with Ebb and Fold make it really free, and more importantly um, with uh, with Icelanders probably needing to move more towards Arcane. Ebb and Fold into Icelander is probably also the move, because you can short circuit a blue Aether Ice Vein that way. Um, I was on Carapace for a while, right? So I could present AB4 Spell Void 2 into Wizard, which is really cool until you can't kill them. Uh, right? Like, not that means that you won't be able to play any offense, but you know, we have 20-ish total blues, which is a respectable amount, but sometimes you have to go a little shields down. I think the Ebb and Fold is probably the most important piece because it demands them to have a better wildfire turn, because they're going to need to, you know, Ebb and Fold blocking a wildfire. If they arcane you 2 more times after that, Ebb and Fold stopping 6 damage at a minimum. And yeah, I've had games where I present AB4 Spell Void 2, and then I just I played like the way the hands came, and I was probably too impatient trying to push offense, but they were just able to kind of casually block, and they walked down as I pressured them, but they went through enough of their deck and were able to set up the wildfire. And then when I was finally able to like pressure it with a widespread destruction, they just killed me in response because I had to go a little too shields down to present the offense. Um, so like Ebb and Fold, Spell Void 2 is way more important than 2 extra AB. Um, and I don't want to be on Carapace into Icelander, but if it's in your list and you're playing into a Kano, by all means, go up to AB4. But I don't know that it's essential. Um, and obviously I'm not on it right now. But yeah, Ebb and Fold's the important piece into Kano. Similar to the Icelander matchup, we use Vexing Quill Hand to give us a freebie double gate, right? Like value block early, and then as soon as it's time to step on the gas, you break Vexing Quill Hand and send another 6 gate at them, right? So it's like at some point this is sort of 8 damage to their face. Not singularly, but obviously. Um, but yeah, so if you're like super infested with wizards, particularly Kanos, then sure, run Carapace. But if it's just Icelander, I think the Ebb and Fold, Grimoire, Quill Hand, and keep Tunic uh, and Creepers, because you want to be able to threaten a double gate even if you don't necessarily have it, right? Like the threat of activation of Creepers is sometimes scarier for them than actually using it. Um, and similarly, Tunic is there to offset Coronet Peak. You ideally you get Tunic up to 3, and then you just don't use it. Like sometimes they'll CLF you, and you need the Tunic resource to fulfill your turn, and you just got to roll with the punches there and do that. But ideally, you get Tunic up to 3 and you never use it. You just make Coronet Peak not do anything against you. Um, Obviously, if they have Channel like Frigid out, that changes the math a little bit, and it doesn't stop it the same way. But if they have CLF out, you probably should just be taking off turns and blocking damage anyways. Um, so yeah, so that's oh yeah, you have a few Kanos locally. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, if you're facing Kanos on the regular, that's a perfect consideration. Um, you know, I expect there will be a non-zero quantity of Kanos at Worlds, but I expect them to be a very, very minority faction, similar to the Vynnset count at Worlds. So it's not, you know, it is a non-zero consideration, but it is not a huge consideration. Like if I didn't feel like Ebb Fold was a good choice into Icelander at the moment, I would be much more inclined to not have Ebb Fold in my list at all, because I'm not particularly interested in making big deck building concessions to Kano when that could be, if that was another you know a red Phantom Banshee or more Putrid Stirrings or something like that could help with a Bravo matchup, which is something I'm much more likely to expect to see. Yeah, and that's the classic Kano conundrum. Is when when you're guaranteed to be a minority faction, the logical response from most everyone else in the room is, oh well, we can just ignore it and hope that we're not the random person that gets got by Kano. Um, Hey APG, I didn't talk about Eloquence tokens in Vynnset yet, and they're cool. And Requiem for the Damned is an awesome card. Um, but I don't. The problem with Requiem for the Damned is similar to the shares similar issues with um, Jack o' Lantern, right? So Jack o' Lantern is inherently variance based, and Requiem for the Damned is a cool card. It's a 0-cost block 3 Shadow Runeblade thing that you can sometimes do to instant speed, right? Seems like full value, but I don't want to have to make my deck chock full of non-attack actions that don't have go again to make this good. Like the reason when I got spoiled, I was super stoked about Grimoire is uh, the fact that um, you just had it on demand, right? This is literally if you can ignore the blood debt portion, this is literally just Mage Master boots on an Arcane Barrier one, like combined with Arcane Lantern, which is uh, really good, really strong. But the you don't have chains closing power with this deck. It's exactly the same reason why I'm not on. Oh shit! I threw my pumpkins everywhere. It's exactly the same reason why I'm not on Carrion Husk. Uh, you don't end games quickly. If anything, you start games quickly and slow down. You have like the inverse chain problem. If chain ever gets a one-handed piece of equipment that he can play offensively, look out because Grimoire is really sick there. Um, but you don't end games fast. You don't. Even I've had games where I get like a big lead into Alexi, and then I take 6 turn cycles to close it out because I'll be through the better setup cards in my deck, or maybe I hit a funky hand where I need to pitch a blue to make a second rune chant just to present, offense that will take 3 cards from them, kind of thing. You don't close well. It's just not in Icelander's skill set, or sorry, Icelander in Vynnset's skill set at the moment. Someday, sure, but right now, that's not really the case. Um, yeah, obviously the coolest things to do with Eloquence tokens, I think the sort of level 0 play is give a Read the Runes go again, and then play whatever gate you want because you had a rune chant from the start of the turn, and Read the Runes gives you 3 more, and then literally any rune gate card can be played from that setup. That's super powerful. Um, I think we need some more. We need some more eloquence creation or some more non-attack actions that are like already really good without go again, but kick into a whole new gear once you have them. Like if they're cards you want to be playing anyways, which Read the Runes completely is. Tome of Fyendal is a really good card that loves eloquence tokens. Like there are a few really good combinations there, but I think we don't have a critical mass of eloquence targets that makes me um, want to jam Requiem for the Damned into a deck yet. Um, but someday, I'm confident this card will just feel absurd. Um, because it's 0 cost, it's a 3 block, it's a hell of a free roll, and I mean heck, even stuff like Unhallowed Rites can recur this because it's a blood debt non-attack action. So you can potentially set up some crazy late game stuff with eloquence things, which is really cool. Yeah, the dreaded random top 8 Kano. I did so I for one of my local events, a couple, or like I think it was the second weekend of ProQuests. I had cut Ebonfold for Nebula Blade, and I still had Carapace in the list, so I still had these 4 equipment, just a different configuration. But I took Ebonfold out and put in Nebula Blade because I knew some of my a decent number of my locals like to be on Bravo, and I was like, well, if I'm more likely to play against a Bravo today, I should make sure I have Nebula Blade in here. And of course, in this I think there was 19 people at that ProQuest. There was a Kano, and they made top 8, and I almost caught them in the top 8. I fortunately dodged it, but I'm like, I swear, if this is the ProQuest where I catch a Kano on the day where I cut Ebonfold this morning, I'll just decide that the Gem Gods had it out for me. But fortunately, didn't end up being my problem. And actually, Alex Becker played them in the top 8, and the first sand cover they saw, they put it in Arsenal, and you know, they set up their board, they set up their dragons, they got some AB going on, and Kano tried to go off with wildfire. Yeah, I was gonna say, yep, it was wildfire for 8 from the Kano, and Dromai just goes prevent 8. Turns out if your wildfire deals no damage, you will struggle to kill your opponent on your combo turns. So, thank you for your service, Alex. um, but yeah, so I think that's about it for now. Any other questions or anything from everyone in anyone in chat? I've talked about some stuff that I could add, some stuff I'm not running. Um, yeah, Bravo's definitely the toughest matchup of all, by a solid margin in my opinion. Um, but I don't think it's unsolvable. I just think it's really tough. Um, I'm playing this at Worlds, so yeah, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully I can do all the ballers proud out there. And who knows? Maybe I'll take Vynnset to a real finish against some of the best players in the world. But time will tell. Cool. So yeah, I am gonna skip out on Talishar games for today. It's been a long week. did a bunch of stuff around the house today, getting ready for the trip, like winterizing the house and everything like that. Because here in the U.S. we are approaching the cold months. So um, yeah, leaving for Spain next week on Monday. Um, I'm going to because I'll be in Spain, there won't be any further Arcanine Shadow streams for like 2 weeks. Um, I might try and post some updates depending on how things go. I'm rooming with some cool people. I'm rooming with the MinMax folks. They are teammates of Ray Adams and Dan Grosclose, and know a few of them from the tournament scene. So I'll be staying with them over in Barcelona, and yeah, event should be a blast. Um, hoping to do well, but who isn't? But realistically, my goal for myself with these events is always if I can go in and feel like I never beat myself. I can handle losing games. Did it for a long time. That's how I learned Magic, because I was really bad, and my buddies kicked the crap out of me until I figured out how to play the game well. So I'm very comfortable with losing games that I was not meant to win. But if I can show up to the Fab World Championship, play good, never beat myself, can't complain, right? Can't complain if you don't beat yourself. So uh, thanks for hanging out. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments for the video. I'll try and get back to everybody who comments. And after Worlds, I'll probably do an article for the Wraith Times that's talking about this deck as well. And yeah, until then, keep on balling, uh, pay the life, flail yourselves, and thanks for hanging out. I will see all y'all after Worlds. Later.